All right, before we get started today, any outstanding questions, any things that's been tricky, tripping you up in Bubble so far? Here we go. Today's the day today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today's our database day. We'll see how much we can get done today, just like every other. We've been going, as you probably have noticed, down one block at a time. We started with the UI design. We went to UX workflow. We now are going down to data. I want to just point out real quickly the styles, and we'll come back to it. I have a few minutes from the schedule today to talk about the styles component. I didn't have time to talk about it with the design, but the design piece in the top left goes hand in hand with the styles. Like those two boxes should really be put together, or one should be inside the other, really, because the design piece only makes sense as much as you are consistent with your design across all of your pages. Okay, so just real fast, let me just create a new page. I'll just call it new example.
What's to follow along?
No, I'll just show this one. So I'm just going to insert a new text element into this particular page. And I'll say, this is a H1 heading. Now I've talked about this sometimes. You've seen me do this a few times, so it should start to just feel a little bit more natural. Okay. Right now, this is a little confusing because it's not an H1 heading, right? That's only the text that's there. I haven't done anything to change the style of this text. Right now, it's actually body text. Okay, and we know that because if we scroll down on this particular element and the options over here, the style says body copy. Okay, if I click on this and switch it to H1, either dark font, right? Or if I did light font, it would make the text maybe white or anything close to white. Okay, most styles are done that way. Do something dark, do something light, so that if the background behind it is not, showing the text, then I need to fix that. So these are defined in these styles. All of this stuff right here is all defined over here. Okay, so all of these options that we're choosing from, we actually create that ourselves, right? We go in and we make that what we want it to be. So if we want to change this H1 heading dark, if I want to say, you know what, I don't like that it's blue and I don't like that it's that big, I can go into the styles and scroll down over here. Eventually, I'm going to find the H1 elements. Okay, text H1 heading dark. And I can make adjustments to it. But the key point here, again, is consistency across pages. If I change it one time here, anywhere where I've marked it to say H1 heading throughout any of my pages, it will change all of those. Does that make sense? All right, that way on a page, I'm not making it size 22 font over here. Then I go to the next page and I made that 24 font and I forgot what size I used. I set it one time in the styles, okay? And then I define it here when I double click on the elements and I scroll down and I define it here with the style. Okay, so this is why body looks like this and H1 looks like this. And this fits HTML and CSS standards. When Google scrapes your website to say what is what, it usually picks up the H1 stuff as the most important thing. That makes sense, right? It's bigger, it's bold, usually it's sticking out. It's the thing on the page that's supposed to grab people's attention. So when Google is scanning your pages or crawling your pages is the technical term, it's going to look for those and assign them more weight. Okay, all of that it gets attached to, red, Nike, shoes, men, whatever. Those terms need to be in your page so that when someone searches out on Google, there's a match, right? There's a match to the domain. There's a match to men's red shoes in the URL. And also when you go to that page, you're not surprised to see those words scattered throughout your page. But we have to give in the background, we have to give this what we call like metadata, okay? Which is, this needs to be designated as H2. So that Google knows that this is a pretty important thing. It's a little bit less important than the category like men's red shoes, but it's still kind of important. So H2 is what we'll call it. So I might go in and say, you know what, that's not an H2 heading. Let's make that H2 heading dark. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, and typically they go down in size and less intense as they go down in size as well in terms of coloring. Yes, Julie.
You're going to add like the name Nike.
So typically when you're going for the brand, that's going to be tied to the domain. That's going to be enough up here for Google to pick up that this is you, like Nike matches your domain name. So generally the categories don't say the title, like H1 doesn't say the title of the brand of the company. They do more about describing what's on the page.
I mean, if you were reselling, they would.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like, if you were a shoe store and you wanted.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, you want an H1 category to say like the brand name and the H1. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And that also can sometimes just depend on how much room you have on the page. If it's a really long, name, you might have to just be stuck with using that as an H2 because the text is so long. Yeah.
Because you're saying is that like whether it's H1, H2, H3, Google scans that whichever one it is it ranks it as far as how much close of a match it is.
Yep. So they put a mathematical weight to it, a number, and then the formula is created based on the match. So those terms match, and that's a higher weight. Okay, then that's more likely to be a page that the user is searching for. Okay. So all of that labeling H2 and so on is done for what we call SEO, or search engine optimization. All that's a fancy word for when someone searches Google, they get matched the right content, okay, because it's what's on your page. All right, so I just wanted to point that out, that styles goes with design. That's going to become a much bigger issue in a few weeks when we're really paying really close attention to the design and the consistency across all the pages. Okay, today we're going to focus though on the data piece, the last part that we haven't covered yet. Okay, we actually have a little bit of time coming up, I think next week, for plugins, so we'll cover that issue as well. But that's doesn't take too much time, so we're going to just spend more time, a full day, on the data piece today. And I want to start by showing you Excel to try and explain it. And again, we've covered some of these, so a bit of this is a review, but that won't hurt anything. Most people think of Excel as a database when they start building out rows and columns. So it kind of helps to explain what's happening behind the scenes. Let's think about, just in a real simple case, a user signing up to your application. Okay, so we would call this the user table, right? Or users. Okay, if you wanted to create a new table, typically in Excel, what we do is we create a new sheet down here. We'd say something like, in the case of Uber, we'd say something like vehicles, right? You need a database of all the vehicles that are in the system. Okay, so that's typically how we think about it in Excel. And I'll show you the parallels to Bubble. So these rows right here are like new tabs down here. Feel good? Like users are a kind of thing, vehicles are a kind of thing that we're going to keep track of, and each one of those is a new type of data, a new table, if you will. Okay, so within users, we've done this once before, but what kind of information would you keep track of about your user in any application? Okay, good. So username, password, email. What else? Good. Phone.
The date that they signed up.
Good. Let's call it created date. Right, the date that the user was created. You might also have a last modified date.
Check how often it's used.
Modified date.
How often they use they log on.
Good. So number of
Uses.
logins. Were you thinking frequency along the same lines? Number of logins? Okay. So yeah, frequency. How about just date last logged in? Right, the last day that they logged in. I was thinking count for the frequency, like the number of times they've logged in.
So it's modified date.
Modified date would be if the user came in and changed their phone number.
Okay.
Right, so they got a new phone and they want to change that particular record. Record. Okay.
Date last paid.
Okay. That's paid. Okay, good. Their subscription renewal date.
At this point, then you could also link their credit card and bank account information.
Okay, good. Some of the payment stuff will be handled directly through
Stripe or
a
something.
plugin.
Yeah.
So we plug into Stripe's system. Stripe is just what's going to handle all the payment processing. They're going to keep track of some of those, but yeah, that's really relevant, right? They need to keep track of all the information. Like when is this set for renewal? And you want to show that to your user, right? A lot of things I sign up for, I cancel right away so that I don't forget the auto renewal thing. You know, I'll sign up for it and I only want to test it for 30 days. So I sign up for it, the next day I cancel it, but it takes me through the full 30 days. Those are just kind of what's your user going to do, the UX questions, right? And that would certainly need to be shown in the database. Okay, so here's what happens in Excel. Username. Two issues going on here that are very relevant for today. One is data validation. Okay. And I'll say the next one is data. Let's just use this word type. It's not perfect, but the word type is used twice in Bubble. It's used to create this table. It's also used to say what kind of data are we actually putting in. So let's say for the username, in regards to data validation, what's typical about usernames that are some restrictions that are common in apps when you develop a username? Yes, I'm trying to think of where I want to put that. Let me hang on to that one. I might circle back to that at the end of class today, but yes, we want to know that that's real because you don't want a user to just type in someone else's email address, right? They sign up with your email address and then they get into the app and start using it. And this is a UX question, right? It would be kind of poor design that someone can just take your email address, sign up and start using the app before that email address has been validated. So that's why you have to go to your email and say, yes, this is me, because you've just proven that the only way you could sign up for the app is you have that email address, you logged in and you got the email, right? That's a UX issue that we talked about last class. We put this person through the steps for a reason. Did you have a thought or question? You're just stretching. Number of characters, okay? That's the shorthand for characters. Okay. So we might only allow up to 15 characters, right? No spaces are allowed. Maybe no special characters. So we won't allow an exclamation point and so on. All of this is grouped into the term data validation. Okay. We'll restrict your input. We won't let you, again, from a UX perspective, this is really important. We'll restrict your input if it has one of these issues. It has a space. It has too many characters, it has a special character, then we just won't let you put that in. Okay, you can do all that in Bubble. So that's a really important thing. If someone came here and just typed in this with a space and an exclamation point, whoa, that's not good, right? We didn't allow any of those and then they got through our system, is now sitting in the database incorrectly. Okay, we don't want that to happen. So data validation is forcing it to stop, forcing it to not allow it to go through and actually make its way to the database. In Excel, that happens all the time, right? When people are manually keying in information in the database, oh, they can't figure out what the problem is. Like, why is this off? It's because someone manually keyed in this and they didn't mean to put in that space. They accidentally hit the keyboard. That's why we never want this to happen, right? In an application, you never have manual keying in information, right? If the user made a mistake, it's on them, but you don't want that mistake to be your side that you type something in wrong. Bubble takes care of the password by itself because it knows that password is a really common one. It's not even going to allow us to do anything with that. Okay, I think that's a good thing. All right, email. It also kind of takes care of that itself. Okay. Phone number. Okay, here's an interesting one where we get a little bit more into data type and talk about some of the differences. Someone types in something like, 217 555 555. Okay, I hit enter. In the background, when I hit enter right there, Excel decided what kind of information this is. It does it for you. You never have to think about it when you use Excel. Okay, and another good example is to create a date. Okay, let's just put in today's date, 10/4/2021. When I hit enter, it doesn't look like much to you, but Excel decided in the background how it wants to treat that data. What is its type? Okay, So in this last one, what is the type?
Date.
A date. So it holds on to that information in a special way and says, you know what, we're going to call that a date. That's a special kind of way of keeping track of that information. What do you think? This is kind of a trick question. What do you think about the phone number? What kind of type do you think a phone number is? You might naturally think, well, number, right? You're saying the word number in your description. Phone number is kind of a tricky one. And sometimes numbers in general, like let's say for you, the student at FGCU, you have a UIN, right? 815, whatever. Okay. It looks obvious. This is actually a perfect illustration of what's going on. Okay. This is why Excel can be tricky sometimes. I was going to make this point anyways, and it did it for me. You see me trying to resize that and it wouldn't show the number. So why is that? Okay, most people just get frustrated, they click delete and never think about it. Let's actually think about what just happened. Okay. It decided to give that number a data type. It didn't match what my brain wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a number. What did it do? It made it to a date, actually,
Really?
I believe. Okay.
Isn't it a percentage on top?
It says dates and times that are negative or too large are shown as a number. It changes into something I'm not expecting.
Okay.
Any number, it should have just been, let's just go over here. Right, any number I should have no problem resizing. It's going to show the number. So Excel is having some kind of issue with this, right? It's most likely because Excel thinks that this is a date because the cell to the left of it is a date. And it thought when I typed in that number, okay, that's another date. Okay, but I typed in a crazy number. I don't know if you saw that. I typed in a lot of digits and it doesn't know how to process this like crazy big date. Okay, so it just puts these hash marks in. There's a confusion in Excel with what that should be, what kind of data type it should be. Okay, these are really important issues, not for just user experience here, just looking at it, but also for memory. Okay, so the big issue in data types is memory. Okay, and how the computer stores in memory what you just typed in. Okay, you obviously want the memory type to use as little as possible in any application. Okay, so if something is yes, no in your application, it can only be 1 or 0. Okay, you wouldn't want that to be a string. A string is just anything that has text. Like the word text is a string. If I just put in like the word, how about this number of logins? 2, right? That's a string because I typed in the word TWO. But if I actually put in the number 2, Excel is pretty good about this, it'll just make that a number, which actually is a data type. Okay, but there's a special kind of string that's called a Boolean, where the only options can be yes or no, or 1 or 0. So why take up unnecessary room in storing memory in your computer or in your application when you don't need to, right? You want it to be just a Boolean. If it's just the only thing a user can do is say yes or no. Okay, then you should specify it as that. One of the options in Bubble you're going to see if I create a new field is say, how about something like status? You know, the status of it is just true or false, yes or no. Okay, then I would go to field type, okay, and say yes, no. Okay, and the whole reason is just tied back to memory, how much memory you're using of the computers or servers processing. Okay, so I'm showing you Excel because Excel does this automatically. This step right here where we're choosing what type of data it is, Excel has always done that for you. But Bubble is asking you to now tell you, well, what is it? What is the thing that's going that you're going to hold on to? Is it text? Is it a number? Is it a range of numbers? Is it a date, a range of dates, a data interval? Is it a Boolean, yes, no? Is it a file, right? Someone takes a picture of themselves and they want that to be their profile picture, then that needs to be a file that you're holding to. Or an image, same thing. an address. Okay, those are the different types of fields. You only use number, I shouldn't say only, but 90% of the time, whatever, 99. You use number when calculations are expected. I'm going to put, for example, 1 + 1 = 2. Would the university ever have any reason to add UINs, like add the two UINs together? Right? So at first glance, a UIN looks like a number, right? We type in a student's UIN. Let's just make the category right here. Let's go all the way through the loop, okay? Let's say user. Oh, we already have a user one. Okay. UIN. All with me? Right? Students have a UIN. Your natural inclination will be to go in and say it's a number, right? Because you're thinking like, I'm going to type in 815, whatever, as the UIN. But you should be asking yourself when you click number, will I ever add, subtract, multiply, or divide this thing? No, probably not. So you know what? It's a text. So UIN, right? So the user has a UIN, which is a type of text.
But when FGCU classify the user as a UI or identify? So like the university doesn't really care that my name is Austin. They care that I'm 815. You know what I mean?
Yep, your UIN, yep.
Would we put that under the categories?
Here's what we do, okay? So actually this is perfect time. This is exactly what I was going to do right now. I think I'm going to address what you're bringing up. Okay, so we're all good here. Data validation, huge issue. What you allow the user to type in the input fields is a big deal. You can't have things that you don't want in your database. Okay, so you have to restrict it. Data type, also really big because of the memory and the storage for the application. Okay, so at the university, we have different types of people here, right? We have faculty. This is not a perfect description, but it helps us, okay? We have students. Let's just say the third bucket is staff, but we could probably list 5 other categories. Okay, so the university could make a choice when they set up the database. Okay, they could say, you know what, we need a table for all 3 of these. Right, so they would, let's think of it in terms of Excel. They'd go in here and say, okay, we need a new table. We need the table to be students. All with me? Then they could make one for faculty. Then they could make one for staff. However, okay, what naturally is going to happen when you start working on your database, you go, okay, so what information would I keep track of for a faculty? Okay, well, I need their email, first name, last name, UIN, right? Well, guess what? I need a UIN, email, first, last for all 3 types of people. Okay. So when you start to see redundancy happen, and I told you this last class the one before, when you see redundancy happen where you're like, I need to make a UIN first, last, email for each one. When you start to feel that redundancy happen, you have to stop for a second and go, wait a second. He said when things are happening over and over and over again, I should like pause, okay, and think about my design. So what should we do instead? Instead of creating 3 tables, we should group all of these categories and call them a user. Okay, we should call all 3 of these groups a user that are at the university. Maybe there's others, right? Maybe there could be a 4th and 5th. Okay, so we'll call them all users. And we'll just say that a user has a status. Okay, so user has a status, and the status is going to be one of these things. Okay, so I would go here and say status of text, right? This is a text. The word faculty is text. The word student is text, and staff is text. So I say, okay, create. Now, when I actually go to modify the data, I'll go into users and I'll just pick one here. The actual data here, status would be something like faculty. Okay, and that's of type text, right? The word faculty is text. It's not a number, it's not a date, it's a word, faculty, text, also called a string. Okay, if I wanted to add a new user, I would just change the status to student. They all have a UIN. They all have a email address. They all have a first name. They all have a last name. Okay, so I'm just going to do that one time. I'm just going to create the first name, last name, all stuff once. Okay. Questions about that? Yeah. What up?
So when you are going in and modifying so you went into user.
Yep.
And are modifying the status as faculty. Is that right?
Yep. So I can create a new entry. This is, I'm going to show you how to create new rows from actually the app itself, but let's just look at the database here and say, okay, I want a new user, right, a new entry. And his first name is John. Last name is Doe. And he's a student with email address jdoe@fgcu.edu. Okay, the slug, the end of the URL, which we've mentioned several times, really important, can be automatically generated. I'm manually typing it in right now, but it could be, how about it would be something like J Doe and then the UIN 815, you know, whatever. Okay. Notice I don't have UIN on here yet, so I would need to collect that information, right? But that could be the unique slug just for that person, because you know it's unique because there's only one person that has that UIN. Right? There might be two people named J Doe, that's fine, but it becomes unique when it gets to the end, the UIN, because that number is the only number that can exist in our system. Okay, so I would click create. That user now exists in our database. J Doe. Okay. The potential field types are all right here. This is all you have to work with. Okay, there are no others. So you have to make a choice. Is it text, number? I never use numeric range. Haven't found a need for that yet. Date we use all the time. Date range might be helpful for something like a listings or booking app, right? That something is available from here to here, right? That this listing, this rental home is available from this date to this date. Okay. And I just mentioned these others to you. I think they're pretty straightforward. Okay, so what do I see as a common error? I see sometimes people choose number when they shouldn't. Okay, they should use text instead. I see sometimes people use string, or I'm sorry, text. I always say string because that's the technical term, but text is and string are the same thing. Okay, I see people use text when they should use yes and no. Right, because the only thing that can happen in the text is either yes or no, or it doesn't have to be necessarily yes or no either. It could be A or B, right? As long as there are only two options. Okay, and those are the two big errors. Okay, so using text when you should use a Boolean, yes or no, or using number when you should use a text. Dates can be tricky sometimes, so maybe we'll dive into that when it happens. That a date can be kind of an issue. Okay, when you choose date, they want you to put in by default, they want you to put in a time. So like 1 o'clock, you know, not just that it's today, 10/4/2021, but it's also 2 p.m. They might want you to do that, and the way your app set up is like you don't want that, right? You don't want to specify the time of day. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, a few big picture issues, and then we'll get into the real details, and we'll try and test this out. Okay, right now, what I just created and what's in here is I'm in the development stage, which I mentioned to you before. Okay, I have not deployed. Let me move this down. I have not deployed my app. I've not made it live. Okay, I told you the differences before. If you can recall, like the FGCU web dev site. There's webdev.fgcu.edu. Same thing here, right? We're on the web dev version. We're on the trial test we're making changes to see how it happens, see how it goes version. There's another part of your database, which is the actual live deployed version of your application. Okay, so sometimes it'll look tricky. You'll get confused wondering like where your data is. Okay, if you go to app data, that's where you actually see what's been entered. There are two things going on here. Right now, it's in the test version, test environment. But when you click on switch to live database, that's the live database. That's the one where users are interacting with your app at fgcu.edu and they're typing stuff in and they're making changes and your database is being updated on the fly, and you don't want to mess with that database, right? If you're making changes to that database, they should be minimal, and you want to be very, very careful what you're doing. Okay, because if you go in and change something, there can be big consequences. Like the user goes to log in and you've changed something about the way the data is structured. All of a sudden, like they can't get their username into the system anymore because you changed the name of the field, and the whole thing just blows up. You just have to be really careful about playing with the live database. Okay, so that's a big issue. Any questions there? Okay. You can go in and erase the test database as many times as you want. You can wipe it clean and start over and no issue, because the live one is ongoing by itself over there. Okay. In terms of viewing it right now, if I go to preview, I can see this data. Okay. And if I'm wanting to see the live data, then I need to actually go to the, go to the site, whatever.com, fgcu.edu, or whatever your site domain is, and actually just see what happens when I go navigate the website. Okay. It doesn't go back. That's a great question. Okay, so that's a really important issue that you just brought up. So let's say we're going to live, we deploy our app, the data starts to come in for the live application. It doesn't go back to the test database. No, it stays separate. They are treated as like two independent living things. Okay, so you'll be surprised when you go in, you're like, someone just told you that they signed up for your app, and you're going to look for their account, and you're looking in the test database and you don't see their account. It doesn't exist there, because when they made their application, they were in the live version of the app, and it never got sent back to the test version to say that they created it. Well, so you just have to go, you have to click this button to switch into the live database. It's going to give you some alerts and warnings, and when there's actually data in here, it's going to give you alerts like, don't do this. Are you sure you want to get in? Are you sure you want to touch stuff in here? Like, you better be careful what you're doing. They'll give you the warnings, but yeah.
Can you hire like somebody above with you stuff like that, say, hey, I'm having a problem?
I've been on certain plan types, like on the professional plan type. Yeah, absolutely. They take phone calls and troubleshoot and so on. But this is an important moment for an application, right? When you deploy, when you go live. It's as if you send a Word document to someone and you do the track changes. You've all more familiar with this. Like, send it back to me when you have the track changes done. Okay. It's very much like that, where like you made a change, they made a change with the track change, and like you've been working on it since you sent it to them. Right now you don't know, like the thing I just changed, does that match what you just sent me? You've got a mess going on, right? You're trying to resolve the differences of the stuff that you worked on, the stuff that they've worked on, and it can cause a lot of problems. So it's just something to be very aware of and careful with. Okay, so I'll go back to developments and the data, and it'll just say that for me. Okay, you can, I think, do an all at once. So like, let's say 2 months from now, you can say like, make whatever data is in my live, my test data. So you can say like, okay, go ahead and morph it over and send it over, but it doesn't do it automatically. No, it just keeps the live as is. And it says, okay, let me just copy what's in the live to your test version. And you can just see at that particular moment in time, what does everything look like, and just play with it from there. Yep. That's a great point. Great question. Okay. On your own, just on a sheet of paper on your computer, what I'd like for you to do in small groups, okay, is just think about like you are the database manager for Uber. Okay, and you're setting up Uber's initial database. And you have to think about what the data types are going to be. Okay, this is for the recipe app. It has categories, it has recipes, it has users. But I want you to brainstorm for just about 5-10 minutes, like so just a very short exercise. What would be the initial categories, the initial data types right here that you would set up for Uber? Like what would they be? What would the names of those be? And what information would you hold in any one of those tables? So I'd like for you on a sheet of paper, or if it's on your computer, you can just do subheadings, to write them out like this, right? Where you have a table for each of your types. Like this would be category, recipe, and user. So 2 minutes just to kind of see that you all are kind of feeling this. The first thing you'd say for user, by the way, remember, is like, well, this is the recipe app, but I'll mix things up here. It's like UIN, right? Something I'd collect about the user. So on your list, do that now for 8 to 10 minutes. What would Uber's look like? Make sure we're on the same page here. You're creating the structure for Uber.
Are you turning this in or?
No,
Okay.
just want to discuss this.
And does not work.
I don't think they use usernames, it's just emails. Yeah, so an email, facilitates phone number. First name, last name, separate. Oh, yeah.
Category.
Billing address. Yeah, billing address.
We're doing it based on the recipe.
No, Uber. Uber, yeah. Yep, doing this for Uber. Yeah.
Do we include Uber Eats in this? I don't.
They do like user ratings, so rating.
Yeah, I like the calendar.
Number of
That would probably be on the
drives.
Yes. Drive from
Number of drives.
capacity. Their name.
Yeah. Well, but that would change depending on like where you're at. I don't know if that would be in the data. I think that would. What would be the recipe version of Dr. Arsenault?
Yeah.
So a user's current location, would that be stored in a database? Alright, but that might not be under a user category, it might be under something different. Because that's what would change, right?
So user, current location.
Current location.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Probably also need to have.
You bring up a great point about, yes. These seem permanent, like the ones on campus I use, they can all change. Right? Like the person's first name might change. So their location definitely is going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna put down history.
I think that's it.
So then
We might have missed
just to kind of
something.
combine, I guess.
And then we have, drivers would be different categories. Same thing, email.
That's it. Restaurants, meetings.
Probably email, I imagine.
By the way, there's not one.
Possibly a physical address, mail stuff too.
Is it can be.
Yeah, so for the writer,
Oh, background.
have a lot of the same.
Any background checks? I think you do. And they're just gonna guess or no. Oh, no, would they even be in the database if they didn't pass? No, I don't think so, right?
Might have like a.
Car information.
Yeah, so that would be, actually, if you're agreeing that they would be able to see.
Number of rides. Rating.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, ratings.
Yeah. Modified date.
And then you might figure out how they miss some stuff.
Basically, how often. Yeah, right. So
They split,
I don't know what else there would.
Like me?
They're nice chairs.
I don't know, I don't think you have to use your social.
Well, then like, you just start to fall asleep though.
So there's that. For Uber itself.
I mean, there's probably another category.
I'm just gonna put down Uber itself.
Figure it out.
Obviously, the address.
Yeah.
Here. Address.
Yes.
Yeah, I write music. I did marketing all 4 years of high school. I started school. I have an average
Okay, some groups have taken the technique of just like listing all the data. Like, I know this is something we have to keep track of. I'm not sure where it goes. That's good. All right, I like that. Do that for your groups as well. I also like that you put them into the category. So a driver would have.
Walls, but they have a primary model.
Whereas these guys are like flash straight out. Last, like, last night. Yeah. Restaurant.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Driver.
I stopped by this place.
I think I could benefit.
We can do that.
I can't either. Take it shows.
Yeah, we'll go for about 3 to 5 more minutes. List as many things as you can think of.
Have you seen anything crazy that not any other groups will go over?
Yeah, we'll do the aggregation here, see what everyone did and didn't think of.
What you probably do is do average rider distance and then average driver distance. Those would actually be different. I don't know why everyone loves it. We're so we used it 2 times. I guess. Then again, you also think about like you're literally summoning a stranger from the internet to take you when you are incapacitated to your house. Look, I'm out of there.
And then I'm doing.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's really nice. That's a nice feature. I'm sure they did after, yeah, plenty of people saw an opportunity to really
Yeah, I've seen lots of different answers. I don't know, could be good for that. Lots of different techniques here.
And I mean.
All right, let's see if we can get any agreement here on some of the major categories. I know there's lots of different approaches to building a database. This is one part of the exercise. When you were all challenged to do it yourself, you're going to notice that there's not one right answer. Okay, this is kind of just the way it goes. You will find the right answers over time as users interact with your app. That you go, man, this would be a lot faster, to a question I just got earlier, if it was structured differently. Because what I need to show the user, right, needs to be from a smaller list, let's say. That's a good example. And I don't want Bubble to have to go in and search 10,000 records for one needle in a haystack. I need to like break that out into a new category so it's easier to find and display it to the user. That stuff you kind of just figure out once you're in it and doing it. And you go, oh, I need to change the structure of this. So yeah.
And how big of a difference does it make if it's in some giant database?
A big difference. Yeah. So seconds a difference, but seconds in an app when your user's waiting for 2 seconds for the app to load versus milliseconds. You know, most of the expectations we have in apps today are things are done in milliseconds. They're actually calculated that way, right? That as soon as you hit that thing, it immediately shows what you're expecting it to show. Yeah. So yeah, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, big deal. Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
was gonna say, this is the point of interest on that, is that a lot of companies like to be close to Wall Street. Because it's like the difference it makes in
For trades, yeah.
because close to their computers are to the line.
We all want to shave those milliseconds off, and you actually just brought up one more point. If you can all remind me, the numbers field is an interesting one. I'll just say it real fast before we get into it. You could just take 1 second. Like the number 1/3. Okay, you all know the decimal is 0.3 forever. From the computer's perspective, like this is a kind of a tricky challenge, right? Because let's say you wanted to take this number and do something with it, like add it against something else. Well, how should the computer store this value when it goes on forever, right? The 3s keep going until the end of time. So the computer has to make a choice and say, like, well, at the 2000th character, we'll cut it off and say, okay, it's just 0.333 2000 times. If you work in finance, that's a big deal, right? you start chopping digits off of numbers when you work in finance, you can't do that, right? Some things that are sold, some commodities that are sold, grains and so on, they're sold at a fraction of a penny, right? So people buy so much grain that it's sold at a per unit price of 0.0001 pennies, right? So they don't even buy the grain at it's not even a penny per unit, it's a fraction of a penny per unit. So when you're operating at decimals at 3, 4, 10, 15, 20 decimals out, you have to be really careful about how numbers are stored in databases, because you can't have those kinds of issues come up. They could be talking about differences of tens of millions of dollars because you chopped a 1 off the end, right? In our class, what we're doing here, tell me if you're doing anything in finance or whatever, like let me know. That can be an issue. I'm looking at one student in particular, because that can be a problem, okay? That you have to deal with the digits problem. Most of the time the computer's okay with it. They'll just replace it with the number 1/3 and do the calculations, no problem. But storing that number is an issue, okay? Just wanted to make sure I threw that out there. Something to be aware of. Okay, so let me, I don't mind to just drop those. Another data type in an Uber app. I think we can all agree on user, right? Like you're gonna have a user in your Uber app. Some of you probably already from that point got a little, went in some different directions. So what do we think of in terms of like user for Uber?
But you're gonna have a driver and a rider.
Okay, so there we already start off with a big issue, right? Okay, so instead of user, you can set up the database to say, you know what, forget that altogether. When you come into my app, you are either a writer or you are a driver. Okay, so what's the issue with that particular setup? I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying what could be an issue down the road. Okay, you have, good, right? A person wants to have both roles. Just like in at GCU, I want to be a teacher and a student. Okay, that can be an issue, right? And how you set up your database. So what you could do, just one solution here is to say user, and within user they have a status. Okay, and the status is either writer or driver. Right, you could handle it that way. What's better depends on how you're going to set up the rest of the database and how you pull data, how data gets entered, and so on.
I feel like at volume, that would become very
To have it be user status writer driver.
When you get to the volume that Uber has, like it's fine for FGCU, so it's what, how many people? Uber has 18 million, I think.
Probably more than that.
Like,
Yes,
just
yeah,
riders.
yeah. They tend to think of it, their databases don't have troubles with volume because the way their databases work, they pay the money for speed and how data gets put in.
Quick question. So are you saying that in the database, it's the status would be writer or driver?
Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. So let's say we're at Uber, okay, and I say, click on user right here. Here's the category.
Right.
And I'll put status, okay, and I'm going to set it as text. Okay, when a user signs up, they have to make a choice. I'm here, since we're using a real example. Okay, they're on the site. They have the option to sign up to drive. Right, so I would click on that. Because I came to it from this link, USNSE join, I would know as the app developer that they're coming to me to be a driver. Okay, so when they filled out this input form, here's what would happen. Okay, they would click next, they'd move along, they'd get approved. Okay, and at the time that the user was created, so I signed up, Eric signed up. And when I signed up, I went ahead and changed the field status from null, which is like there's nothing there, to driver. We're going to do this, so I think that'll sink in a minute. Like when you actually create a new driver, right? That you get their name, and then you have to do something like set their status. Well, I'd know to set their status as a driver here because they just filled out the driver information. Yeah, I feel like I might have lost some people there.
Well, but then if they decide that they want to ride, would they have to make a separate account, or there'd be a switch on their account where they're like, oh, I'm not driving right now, I want to ride?
Love it. Beautiful question. All with them? Okay, well, like what now, right? Could be just the entire app, right? A lot of design choices here. This is all UX. This is all what we talked about last week about how you design your app, okay? If you do it like this, to your point, you could also say it like this. Everyone comes in, let's say like Cordell. Everyone by default,
I would see you doing
okay, by default is a writer. Okay, so everyone, when a new user gets created, everyone by default will get the writer. Okay. It's just that when I filled out the driver form,
that.
it also added driver to my status. Okay, you could choose to set it up that way to say, okay, driver and writer. Only give me, when you're doing searches for the database, only give me the writers or only give me the drivers. Okay. Do I need to say that in this particular app in this situation? I probably don't need to say writer because you could just design the rest of the app just with the assumption that the person is a writer. Like,
Driver, yes, no.
right, exactly. Okay, so I could have just said driver, to Austin's point, right? And made this a Boolean.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me do create new field, driver. This is how I think we should do it. Okay, this is how, if I was setting up Ubers right now, we were doing this right now live, I would do driver, yes, no, because that's less memory, right? The text string is a bigger memory than is yes, no. I try and always use yes, no where I can. So I'll say driver, yes, no. And by default, they all get a yes, and do it. The writer is another option if we want, okay? So let's leave, let's push the driver off to your side for a second. What other kind of categories did you all come up with? Okay, so you talk about Uber Eats as another business. So what kind of information do you need to hold for Uber Eats? Okay, a menu, right?
Restaurant.
You need a restaurant, right? So you need like the restaurants table. Okay, I don't know if everyone did restaurant or did Uber Eats, but restaurant. And within restaurant, you need the menu. Okay, awesome. Okay. Location of the restaurant, there's, gosh, there must be 50 fields, right? We need to keep track of with the restaurant. Okay, another big category like writer, driver, restaurants. I gave the groups a couple, another example, like a vehicle. Why would I keep track of the vehicles separate, like in its own? What would be the argument for that?
Carry capacity.
Okay, carry capacity could be one of the fields, right?
Yeah, could you link that to the user?
That's what we're gonna do next.
Okay.
Yep. What's your thought?
Like it's license plate, color, time of car.
License, color.
Make, model.
Notice that we're breaking off vehicle because vehicle itself as a unit of a thing, like has lots of like things to describe it, right? So when you have that feeling and you're setting up your database, like the thing I'm creating is gonna have lots of things to describe it. You should think of like, well, this is probably needs to be its own data type. Because there's like lots of ways to describe that thing, like a game, for example, in sports. So a game in sports is a unique thing, right? Because it has like the time the game started. It has who's playing the game, like who are the opponents, the home team, the away team. It has the score of the home team. It has the score of the away team. A game has like lots of information just about that. Yes.
So at some point, there has to be like the employees that work at like the physical headquarters of Uber, they have to be able to get into like a certain platform or something, right?
Okay, user.
Status app.
Yeah, could be status, right, as an employee. Could be that employee is another
Because
option.
you wouldn't want to see the same thing as a writer or a driver.
Perfect. Okay, so let's say user, let's get rid of the driver because man, that does seem to be confusing. Okay, how about employee?
Yes, no.
Perfect, right? That's an easy one. So employees should see a different version of Uber than what you see, right? How do you control that? We just did it. We would show different screens and show different elements and show all kinds of interactions differently because we know that the person who's logged in is an employee.
How
Okay.
long do you think it took them to develop all of this?
Bubble? You mean?
No, I mean like,
Uber.
Oh, yeah, it never ends, right? They're never done because they realize that, it'd be a little bit faster if we like broke this off and yeah. It's, but yeah, from the beginning, I mean, one point to that too, what you guys are learning here, if you've ever heard the term, I think we said it the first day, full stack engineer. Okay, a full stack engineer is someone who knows how to do the front end, the design work, and the back end, the workflows and the database work. Okay, it's just that they know how to write the code. You're learning full stack engineering, but at the highest possible level, not when I say that, I mean like without code. Okay. Okay, so you're seeing like the whole world of the app. Most people, when they go to work at companies, like they go work for Uber, a designer like never touches the database, right? I mean, they might look at the structure of the database and go like, okay, well, the box for that input field, like that particular piece of data needs to look a little bit different because whatever reason, like needs to be like red and this and that, but they would never care about how the database is structured. So I'm challenging you all right now with like learning the whole thing, right? Which is asking a lot, okay? Knowing both sides of the system. But this tool is awesome in that way, right? That you can actually like do it. You can think about both sides of the system. I actually compare that, by the way, as the same thing as a salesperson and an entrepreneur. Okay, what's the goal of a salesperson? Sell more. Okay, what's the goal of the entrepreneur? True. And that is tied to, I think I heard it, making money. Okay, the bottom line is net profit. Okay, do we make money or not? Okay, you can sell stuff without making money. I'll say that again. You can sell things and lose money, right? So salespeople, they're like, sell, more customers. Guess what? There are such things as bad customers, right? I'm thinking in the restaurant industry, and just one student, the customer comes in, is like always complaining and needs this change, needs that change. And you customize your whole menu for this like three people who complain about everything. You're never going to get it right. So you like put all this time, energy, and effort into like making these new dishes, and turns out only those 3 people want them. Like, yeah, did you sell 3 more dishes? Yep. Did you kill yourself? Did you lose money in the process? Yep. Okay. Andre, I know you felt this, but you got certain calls and stuff that you work on these people. It's like, man, I can't help you anymore. Like you're costing our company money. Okay. I know we made a sale here, but we just lost money in the process. Okay. That's the difference. And I think when you get a designer and a developer in a room and they're working, they're optimizing your app, but then they forget, like a full stack engineer has to see the whole picture, right? And see like, well, if you change that button over here, that's going to impact everything, right? Like, yeah, we might get a person to type in their name faster, but like the whole system's going to break because you didn't set up the database the right way. So I do think it's really valuable to see like the whole picture. Like a salesperson turning into an entrepreneur is a good thing, right? Because you realize that one sale may or may not be worth it. Okay. All right. So rider, driver, perhaps you set up the database like this, but this would also cause duplication issues, right? We all notice that, right? Because drivers and riders both have first names, they both have last names, they both have identifiers. So maybe not. I'm not convinced.
We called it driver, but the things that we were tracking was like make, model, year, type, license plate number. It was all things that you started calling vehicle. So what we call driver and you call vehicle, you can merge the 2.
Perfect. That's how I'd set it up. Let's make that vehicle. Okay, what else? That's a really big one for Uber. We're missing like one of the like key categories in Uber. Yeah.
Ratings?
Okay, ratings is definitely one. That's a big part of their app. You can make ratings its own table, or you could vary the ratings with the user, right? You could put the ratings inside the user one and make that fields, or you break it out into its own thing.
Just for you, location, location
Location for what?
for both your driver and rider. So you can match.
Okay, so yeah, so we can have the vehicle's location. Like, where's that vehicle at? Your payments, right? We need our own record of payments, absolutely. I'll say the big category we're probably missing here is the trip, which leads to the payments. Did you say payments? Okay, so the trip is the price of the trip, right? Well, how much did the rider pay for that trip? How far did the trip go? Was it 5 miles, 10 miles? So this would be like length, price, and all other information about the trip. All good? Okay,
So,
the last point, I think maybe I'm coming there, is we have to tie the trip to what?
Price.
Yeah, we're gonna do that with the price here.
rider.
The rider, right? We have to tie the trip that happened to the, I'm gonna get rid of the driver one because this is gonna cause confusion. So let's just make a choice here, just to, so we can move on. Let's call this user. Okay. Guess what? The trip is going to tie to not just the rider. The trip also ties to the driver, right?
So you're linking accounts now.
Yeah, so now we're linking stuff together. Okay, so this trip has to tie to two different entities. It has to, when the trip occurred, it both had someone driving it and it also had someone riding in it. So we need to tie that information to the user table. We need to go find the users that were attached to that trip.
So as the company, would it be easier to say like, treat the rider as revenue and then treat rider as revenue and driver as costs?
The cost.
Kind of deal?
Yeah.
Like money in through rider, money out to driver, and then there's a portion for us.
Yeah, that's what would be contained in the trips. I'd say, how much did we as a company pay for that trip?
Yeah.
Yep, so in the trips
make
column,
one.
not just price, but we also have our cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yep.
then what about having like, almost like an entire section, if you will, for statistics, for like averaging, so like average cost of trip, average this, that. the
Perfect.
other.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Cordell's one step ahead here. So once the data is in the database, we want to do stuff with it, right? We want to calculate things from it. Okay, what we're going to do on that is create something like a dashboard page. So we call it a new page and we call it driver. How about driver dashboard? Because aren't the drivers going to want to know, and they I'm sure have this, the history of their rides that they've given, right? So they're going to want a page they can go to, a screen where they can look at things like the last 10 trips I drove people on, and what was the price that the person paid, and how much did I make on each trip, right? Well, all that information is stored in the database with trips, okay? But we need a page to display it to the driver. So what we're going to do is we're going to call it driver dashboard, and we'll just not clone anything. And on this particular page, we would create that information. In fact, what I do when I'm designing is I'll just type it in. I'll put a text field at the top, and I'll just list my features up here. So I'll say something like driver. This is probably not good practice, but it helps me. Driver wants to see the last trips they gave. So when I'm designing this page, I have my to-do list at the top, right? When the driver goes to this particular page, driver dashboard, one of the things that they're going to want to see is all the trips that they've given, right? If a person's played in a game, they want to go back and see all the games that they've played, okay? So I just put that note to myself at the top. I know I need to build this somewhere. So this is going to be a repeating group, right? Because a repeating group is just going to show all of the times, all of the things in the database where I have given a ride to someone. Any questions about that? Where I can do those calculations, right? I can say, okay, then give me the average of all the rides that I did over the last 30 days. And I would just go into the database In the database, I'd pull the last 30 trips that were tied to me, right? They had to be tied to me. I wouldn't want 30 trips of tied to someone else.
30 trips or the last 30 days.
30 days, either one, okay? And because the trips are gonna have a created date, right? So the last 30 days, all of them tied to me and give me the average ride price. Or maybe they wanna know like their actual profit, like show me the average profit I made on those last 30. You start to see what fields are needed in the database when you type out the functionality. You go, oh, well, I don't even keep track of that data. You go, "Oh." You go back to the database and say, I need to keep track of the average price. I need to keep track of this and that. Okay, how many miles the trip took and so on. Best practice in any application, okay? The less the user has to input, the better, right? So in Uber's case, it's all automatic, right? When the trip is done, it's just all put in the database automatically. The last trip you took, who you picked up, okay? How long the trip was, the fare price, all of it done without you having to go in and type this information in. Right? I used this app over the weekend. I'm into golf. So I downloaded this app where you can scan the green and it tells you the slope of the green. So then you can see the slope as you're trying to read the putt to see if you can make it. So it shows the slope and then you can actually record yourself or have someone record you as you putt it, and it shows the ball like going over the line or not. So it shows like, did you actually putt it on the line, like a television. So when the putt's over, okay, it asks me to put in information about the putt, like, did you make it? Why should I, the user, have to type in yes or no? No, I'm just saying it asked me to put it in. It's like, I shouldn't have to do that, right? Because if I'm hitting the putt and the camera's got this really cool, sweet, technology to see to the putt, like, shouldn't it be able to pick up whether or not the ball went in the hole or not? Right? So I, as a user, shouldn't have to type in, yes, it went in. It should just default to whatever happened. Does that make sense?
Feel bad if you miss it.
Yeah.
Or really good if you make it.
Yeah. Yes. Right? Another, that's the UI UX stuff, right? Like throw the confetti, you made it, right? And then you'd be surprised how big of a deal that is, right? The user takes the phone and sees the confetti go, like, hey, you made your putt. Like, yeah, I did. Cool. Yeah. Big difference than for me like scrolling through all the options, right? What was the date of my putt? Oh, the date was today. I made it. I missed it by 2 feet left. I put in 6 different stats. No one's gonna do that, right? Like no user, and they actually have those things. Like that's actually how the app works, right? I have to go in and type in all the information on the last putt. I'm not gonna do that.
Well, and it's sunny out, you can hardly see what's on the screen.
I'm not doing that. I'm gonna stand here in the sun, burn, typing all this information. I'm just trying to get a scan on whether or not it's in or out. You tell me all the information, right?
That's why I downloaded the app for it.
Yeah. So that kind of UX, right? That kind of experience as a user, immediately, I'm done using this app, right? I'm not going to type in information after every single putt. That's ridiculous. Okay. So best practice, the most you can get the database to update automatically, the user doesn't have to type anything, great. Okay, that's great. Yes.
Does it have a, it's a graphic dashboard, does it have like a backside if you
You would create another page, if I'm understanding you right, for like Uber dashboard, your business dashboard. It's actually correcting my typing if you all notice that, I'm trying to put in this capital character. This is data validation happening in real time. Like watch me put the capital D and it just lowercased it. Okay, that's data validation, right? They don't want me to put in a capital letter. Okay, so they're just fixing it in real time on the fly as I type it.
And if you hit space.
Yep. Okay, so Uber, the business, has a dashboard, right? And on that dashboard, they're keeping track of all the rides, every single ride that's been taken on the Uber platform. They call it God's eye view, right? They see everything, all the transactions in a given day. Where did people pick up? Where did they leave? I mean, think about the stuff you could do for a city planning. Like city government officials go and talk to Uber and they're like, show us your last 30 rides in Philadelphia. Click, 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 Philly, up on the map. People go from here to here all day long. here's how they do it. At 8 o'clock, there's 1,000 rides between 8 and this time, and they go take this route. Yeah.
Is that cutting into the stuff that they were in trouble for? Like people's information?
Yeah, there was something that came through. It was a little more, a little too much was.
Like they were giving people's names.
Yeah.
All about the travel,
Yeah.
where they were all going.
So this is a choice we all, have to make too, about what do you show back to the user? Right? What should the whole world be able to see? Okay. I was gonna just talk briefly about it at the very end of class today, but just so that you know, there is a privacy tab inside data as well. Okay. And this is one more layer of protection to your application where you can set some of those things to say, never show people X, right? Never show people this table that are not a rider, not a driver, not an employee, whatever, right? So if you're not an employee, like never show people, a good example is like salary. Some companies don't want to show salary to other people, right? So if you're an employee, never show salary to people other than the current user, right? So if they mistakenly went to a page where you accidentally set it up or that everyone could see salary, you didn't mean to do that, you just messed up, this would catch it. Right, because it had a rule to never show that information about someone else's salary to the current user who's, they should only be able to see their own salary, not everyone else.
So like, okay, so
Yeah.
so some apps, like flash, like the last one of your social, or like stuff like that.
Yep.
Is there like in Bubble or just general databases,
Mhm.
is that like known to Uber? Is that process filing different third parties, like channel specific, makes more sensitive information?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the Social Security in some of those cases. It could be third party. The government has a particular way to connect without them holding it. Most of the time, it stays encrypted on their database, so the actual number itself is not ever shown to anyone. So there's a code for it or key for it. So what's actually held in the database is a key that represents that number, but not that number itself. That's one way to handle it.
If there's something, so there's last one, 1, 2, 3, 4, might be 2, 3, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 6.
It's just a random number to tie to it. Yep. And one last point on that. I think
I was asking about
I had another point to make about that. We forgot.
dashboard for like running the business, like if you have all the users in there. Feel like Uber's dependent on this data to pay its drivers.
Mhm.
Is there a way that they keep their payroll calculation in there and export it to like a business or separate? They like might get a report that says these users have earned this much money and they export it to like a accounting software that then issues checks and then it takes it back in to show them that they paid.
I think it has to. Yeah.
Because there's nothing like that in Bubble that is gonna allow you to.
No, yeah, that's a plugin. Yeah, that's when we click on the plugins tab and we go down and say, okay, let's build a connection to QuickBooks. Okay, and if QuickBooks is handling our payroll, then we would just feed it that information. So the trip, right? We had to Austin's point, he said, we need to keep track of what we're spending on the driver. Like, yes, absolutely. So what we're doing is we're going to give QuickBooks this particular row of data that says, here's what we paid the last driver, so that you can go and process the payment to them. Yeah, I'll need to look into how applications of that, see where people have done that before and get back to you. I haven't seen it yet. So once I dive into that, I might be able to find it for you. But definitely a plugin where we're sending data to another third-party service to actually process payments to the drivers.
I guess that really makes sense that everybody like, if you have a company, it doesn't really make sense that all these people have access.
Yeah, let me dive into it more. But that's a great point, one that we should see how they designed it. Okay, I think this will all really sink in when we do it now. And the last step I want to do is actually create records in the database. So you all feel what it's like to not just add stuff here, but then create a user, right, that actually has this information and it can think. So one point that was brought up too while we were doing this exercise was this information changing. Okay, so a user gets created, they have a first name, they have a last name. But what if and this happens all the time, particularly more for females, at least in the United States, is when you get married, right? A lot of females take the husband's last name, so they change their last name in the application, right? Names, a lot of this information changes. That's okay. This is a variable, right? The whole definition of a variable is that the information that it holds can vary, can change, right? So it's okay that at the beginning, whatever the initial content is, it's okay, whatever it is, it can be modified. Okay, so anything that's on there is subject to change. All good? All right. So let's go create a new page. So I just want you to go to your application. Okay, any one that you have open. And if you're going back into the experimental one, we've been using perfect. Okay. Okay, let's do something like real super simple for today's exercise with Uber. Since it's okay that if you're using the recipes app and things are a little confusing in there, it's fine. Let's just stay with the app that you're in. We're going to create the vehicles data type. Okay, and we're going to stick with the user idea. All good? Okay, so users can come into the app and they can have vehicles. Okay, we know that some of the users will not have vehicles because they'll just be riders, right? They're not actually driving cars. But let's just go to the user tab. So we're going to click on data first. Okay, all with me? Okay. When you come to it, just make sure you have a user category. Okay, and let's put in this information. So first name, last name. You're going to select text as the option. And let's also create the one for employee. So you're going to go down to create new field. You're going to create these 3 categories. Yep.
Sorry, now I have recipe. Backspace those.
Yeah, so just come over here to new type. Do you have a user type? Is there a user one over here that says user? Should be on the left.
All right, that's right.
I think by default, Bubble wants you to use user as your person account. So click on the user one and then set these up. You're all good there? You're setting them up now? Okay. Okay, so let's do status. Okay, so create new field. Let's go with that status option. So status, and let's make it a text type. And that status is going to be driver, rider, others maybe. Okay, so status is text.
So. My only concern with doing it that way is what if I'm a minor driver and employee?
Okay, I was gonna do it. I was gonna make the mistake first. Sometimes I go back and forth on teaching. Like, do you show the error first or the right way? Now I'll show the right way because you brought it up. Okay, you need to click this option for list. Okay, so if you went ahead and created the status, go back and delete it. Okay, so let's click cancel. If you have status here, click the delete option on the right to delete that row. And let's start over with status. Okay, so you got these 3: first name, last name, employee. Great. Create a new one, create a new field. Remember, this is just making columns, right? Visualize what you're doing in terms of up here. You have a user table, and that user table has employee. It also has first name. It has last name. Okay, we're going to add status. But here's the issue with status, which we just brought up again. Okay, you can be a driver and a rider. So this can't just be one thing, right? It needs to be allowed to be multiple things. So the way you do that is to click on create new field, do status. use text, and it says this field is a list. In other words, it can have multiple entries. Yep, that's right. Okay, so all that's saying is that this one could have more than one entry. First name is only gonna have one, right? Last name is only gonna have one bit of text. Employee is gonna have only one bit of information, okay? So we'll click create. Now you're gonna see it says list of text. Okay, so that means it can hold multiple entries, driver and rider. Okay, so we have user, that's, I'm gonna make one more mistake on purpose, okay? And let's create the vehicle data type. Okay, so go click create. So you have a user and you have a vehicle. Notice what they give you by default, right? You didn't even create any fields yet. They already made 4 of them for you. Okay, they know that you need these and you do. Okay, so we'll create a new field and let's call it make. Okay, this would be for cars, and you all know this, you know, make is like Chevy, right? Okay, so what kind of information is that? Text, right? Can you have 2 different kinds of makes? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so one kind of make, okay. And what else normally goes with like a vehicle? You get Chevy and the model, right? So let's create a new field, model. Okay. And what kind of information is this? Text. Okay. Can you have 2 kinds of models for one car?
I think so.
Let's handle it as saying no.
We'll say no.
Yeah, for the sake of just making this easy, no, you only have one kind of model. So this would be a Chevy Silverado, right?
Like the way you think.
What's that?
I like the way you think.
All right, there we go.
So
And let's do one more.
you're about to get to year, right?
Yep.
And this is the kind of a question that I just.
Okay, so now year.
Yeah.
Would you ever do a calculation to a year?
It's gonna be text.
No, it won't be a number, but it won't be a text either.
Give me a text.
You might wanna subtract your year from the current year.
Okay, why would you want to why would you want to subtract the current year?
Only have a car sold.
Yeah.
So
So
maybe
the
you want to show the user what? If you want to subtract the current,
If it's in-
okay,
Or how.
how many years it had. So maybe you do want calculations for a year, right? You want to take the current year minus the year of the car.
But you also have the selection for date. Wouldn't you want that to say if a car is from before this date,
Okay.
then they cannot use it?
Okay, the date and the how they probably have it set up at car dealers and so on. Yes, they probably have it set up with the date. The date gives more information and it gives the year, right? So I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like your thinking. Like, well, if you gave the date, that contains the year as well.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay.
Well, but the date of what? The date you bought the car? Because-
So you'd have to specify, right? You'd have to specify exactly. You'd have to specify what you mean by the date. So you'd have to describe it here as by saying date of creation, right?
Manufactured date.
Okay,
Because
manufactured date.
the manufactured date's inside the
Right. So this is how you do the date. You do manufacture date.
Yeah, you only have to.
We don't need a year.
You can
Okay.
say the first-
Well,
No, all right,
years
I'm just
inside
showing
the-
as an example. All right. Let's keep it real super simple today. All right. So manufactured date is not what we're gonna use, right? We're gonna make it real easy. Okay. Because this is how we mostly talk about it. Let's just keep it easy for today. Year. Okay. And let's call it a number because we might do calculations to it. Okay. Easy for today. Can a car have multiple years? No. I'm gonna answer that question. Okay. Okay. So Chevy Silverado 2021. Right. And you can think about everything else it could be, right?
Color, capacity.
Thank you. Okay. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, here's the issue now. We have a user table. We have a vehicle table, right? We have these 2 tables created. What do we need to do with these 2 tables? I think I just heard it. Link them, right? Because some users must have these vehicles. The vehicles wouldn't exist, at least in the case of an Uber app, without a user. Okay, so they have to be tied together somehow. Like, users need to be able to have a vehicle. They don't have to, right? You need to be able to, right? Could be that the user doesn't have a car, whatever, all right? In our particular case, they're all going to have one, but whatever. Okay. So they're tied together. So this is a different procedure, okay, in our app, okay? So we'll go to vehicle, okay? And we'll go to create new field. You're all with me? We're on the vehicle one. Okay. We're gonna create a new field. This time we're gonna do something special, okay? We're gonna call it field name user. This gets really confusing, but it's user. There's our new column. We don't do type text, which is what you're going to do with the temptation, right? The user is like Eric. So the natural inclination here, like what you want to do is select text, but that's wrong. That does not link the two together. You have to scroll down to the bottom and actually select the user at the bottom that's auto-generated. That's this table. Okay, so I scroll down to the bottom. Did you all see this option? Because user was created, this links the two tables together. Okay, it says connect me to a user somewhere. All good?
We can call that driver.
Yeah. Let's stick with user just for simplicity's sake on this particular example. So we want them to match, but it could be something different. Okay, you could rename it something else. Okay. Now here's a question we have to ask ourselves. Actually, I'll let you guys tell me. What's the question we have left to ask ourselves?
Oh, is it a multi? I would say.
Okay. We just said the vehicle, the new user. So what we have to ask ourselves is, could two people be on one vehicle?
I wouldn't
No,
allow.
because you would need to be able to identify different vehicles by VIN to make sure that they're individual. So
Well, it's just an interesting question throughout there, right? We have a design choice to make here in the database again. Like, could two people be tied to one vehicle? Maybe we just, for simplicity's sake, in this right now, need to say, no, we don't want that to happen. Okay. So husband and wife is an interesting example, right? Okay, husband and wife is a perfect example. They both drive for Uber. They both drive for Uber, right? So they have the same vehicle. I'm actually on that basis willing to just go ahead and change this. Okay. Because two people could have one vehicle. All good? So let's click here to say, yep, it's actually possible that two users could be assigned to the same vehicle. All right. Create. Now the tables are linked together. Okay. I'm going to take off the privacy rules here. Okay. You have two options to then go and create data in your database. Okay. One of the options is to actually just go into the app data tab right here. Okay. So I'm still in the data tab here. All right, eyes up. You all follow me? One of the options for adding data is to click on app data and just manually go in and add new users. Okay, you can just go in and say a new entry. Let's just click on that just so you see the screen. Okay, you all see this? You actually can type in. You have to click on this new entry right here. You can go and type in and make a new user. Okay, let's build an actual user interface for this. Okay, where someone goes and creates a new user with a button. They click on it and they add a new button like they're used to seeing, right? Normally people don't go to the database to add themselves. They go to a screen, right? And then they add themselves to the database. So like, let's do that step. You have a question? To this particular screen, I clicked on the data tab over here and I clicked on app data and then new entry. Okay, so let's all go to the new page option up here in the top left and create a new page. And let's call the page create -new -user. So we're creating the sign up page, right? Where someone goes to the page and says they want to, like, add themselves to the app. So create new user. And let's just go from a blank page, okay? So we'll click create. Okay, we're on a blank canvas,
We
Okay.
know, just because we're building this, that this is like our
right? Yep, yep. You need to know this, the Q is up here in the top right, it says development. Yep, we're in the development section. Okay, let's go to on the left side, we're gonna scroll down and go to input forms because we have people actually putting in information into the application. So that's called an input. Okay, so we'll click on input, the top row. And we'll just draw a box here with the input. Let's change the placeholder to first name. A placeholder is just a text that gives that prompt to the user, like, what should I type here? Maybe I should type in my first name. Okay, that doesn't tell Bubble where the data is going. That's just a placeholder to show the user what they, should be typing in, but that doesn't exactly connect them, okay? We want to make sure the input says first name. It does match that. That's great. That's how it does by default. Okay, let's create another input. Click and drag. And let's call it last name. Okay, what else did we ask for the user? Employee. Yeah, didn't we say employee? Yeah, we put employee on there.
Yeah, we did. Yes, no?
Yep. So let's just do a option on the left for a checkbox. You can do different options for this, right? But I'm going to click on checkbox and draw a button here. I'm going to rename the checkbox from A to, let's say, I want to know if they're an employee. So I'll just say checkbox employee. That'll be our hint. And let's put the label as I am an employee. I'm going to drag this over to the right so it shows the whole thing. So we'd be telling the user like, hey, check this box if you're an employee, right?
I'm just gonna label it I am an employee, but I'm really not, and then by doing that, it would give me access to.
Yeah, so we'll put checks and yeah, all over this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So this screen that would only show in certain situations. Yeah. Yep. So let's do I'm an employee, and then we also had a drop down option. Okay, so the input form a drop down. I'm gonna click and drag this. This is now gonna be from a list. So let's call this status. And you're going to define the choices they can select from. This is one way to control data validation because they can only choose the things that you have pre-provided them. So what are the different options for status? Let's just say driver and then enter and rider. Obviously, this is not the UX that Uber designed, right? But you will get the point after this, okay? Okay, so we made a placeholder for status. That was a drop down. And we just click the drop down, we drag it down here, it said status, and we did driver and rider. Okay, we need one button now to say like create, actually do it. So let's go to the button. You have to scroll up to the visual elements and choose button. We need to give the user somewhere to click to say like actually perform an action. So the button is typically that hint, and we'll say create new user. Just high level, are you all following me here on like what we're doing? Right, we're just trying to give a person to go to a place to go to actually type in the information and they create themselves into the database. Right, you don't normally like the user, you don't ask them to go to the database and type in like what their direct name and information. Okay, so I'm not worried about how it looks or anything, just that we have these fields: first, last, employee, status, screening user. Okay, So we have to tell Bubble where to put the information in the database, right? We have to connect the input form to the database. So if a person fills in this first name, we have to tell it where to go. Like right now, we haven't told it anything. We haven't told it that when someone types their first name, it should go right here. So the way we do that is to go to create new user, we click on the button, and we choose the option for start edit workflow. So I just clicked on this button here, create new user. I'm gonna choose the option for start edit workflow. Okay. And I'm gonna click here to add an action. And the thing that we're doing is creating new data. Let me just give one quick warning. Normally, when you're doing user stuff specifically, Bubble treats it a little bit differently. So like they have special stuff just for account. But for the sake of this example, we're just pretending that data, we're going to use data, okay, not the account option. So let's go to data and say we want to create a new thing. Okay, remember, a new thing in database in Bubble terms, a thing is a row. So you can think row equals thing, right? So when we're saying I want to create a new thing, you're saying I want to create a new row in this table. I want to create a new user. So I'm creating a new thing. So into data, things, create a new thing. Okay. We have to tell it what is the type. It's looking for this, right? Where are you creating a new thing? Where does it go? It goes on the user. Okay. I just now noticed that Bubble won't even let you do it. Okay. So it's catching me in my own training here. It won't even let me do this as an example because it's saying like the user stuff we handle elsewhere, which is what I was just trying to say before. So let me go back and let's do it the right way. Okay. Let's click here, add an action, the account, and one of the options will be to create a new.
Send the user up.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so they have a special one just for users. You're all with me what I was trying to do there. I was trying to like avoid this for teaching purposes, but there's a way to just sign a user up. So here it is, right? Sign the user up. All good? Did we collect email? No. Okay, we'll just leave it blank. It's probably going to force us to use a password.
Yeah, it is. I was just
Did you try it?
Yeah, I'm messing with the passwords box right now.
Okay. Let's skip this for a second and just do the other parts. Okay. So we didn't even ask for an email. We should go ahead and create those fields so we can finish this exercise, but we need to create an email and password field. But let's skip it down, go down just a little bit here, go to change another field. Okay. So this is the part I was really wanting to show you. So this is us mapping it out. Okay. So I said change another field. So let's click here. Okay. And let's do first name. Okay, so this is the mapping procedure right here. So first name, well, how do we know what should go in first name? Well, let's do the click. Okay, and typically you get in the habit of this. It's like you type in the word input because you know it's an input that they're putting their information in. And then that's the search is going to show you all the different inputs. So I typed in input and the two options are first and last name. Well, because we labeled our inputs correctly, right? We know which one it is, right? It's the first name right here. And we want to go one step further and select the value. So it should read like this. The first name in the database, this is going to equal the input form that we made on the page. It says first name. We want the value of whatever the person typed in. Make sense? Right? So whatever they type in here, take that information and put it into the database there. That's what this row says right here. Okay. Now do that again for the last name. Right? Change another field. We want to do last name. The input last name's value. Okay, apparently Bubble has some issue with us not creating the email and password fields. So let's go back real fast. Okay, let's go back to the design tab. Okay, and add those two fields. I'm just gonna kind of like move these up a little bit. Okay, so we'll go back down to input. And we'll do email. It's yelling at me right now. Okay. Here's one thing you want to do with email. Okay, scroll down the other options. You're going to see that the content format is of type text right now. Okay, but that's we can be more specific in this particular case and choose email. Okay, so all I did there, inputs, I made an input. I said placeholder is email, and I changed the content format to email. What is that doing? Back to the very beginning of class, that's doing the data validation stuff. So what they'll do is if a person doesn't type in an @ sign, they won't accept the submission. Okay, so it needs to be at something for them to actually accept that, whatever they type in there. If it doesn't, they won't allow the person to submit anything. Okay, so that's just called data validation. Okay, so we got the email. We also need password. Let's, for the sake of making this go faster, just do one password and not a confirm password. You know, some apps you have to do it twice. Okay, so let's just do one. So we'll type in password here for the placeholder, and we'll change the content format to password. Okay, it's good practice also normally to make sure that you select the option for this should not be empty. Like you don't want people to leave something empty. Let's just keep moving on. Okay, so you have first name, last name, email, password, you're an employee, and what's your status? Or are you an employee and what's your status? Okay, the content format again should be password here. What that means is when someone types it in, they're going to make it dots instead of the text, right? They know that when users type in their password, they don't want people around them physically to see what they're typing in, so they'll make it dots. Okay. All that stuff's figured out for you behind the scenes. That's what Bubble takes care of. Okay, so now we should have everything we need. So we'll click on this button again, create new user, and go back to start edit workflow. Okay, we'll click on the sign user up option. This should be up already. And the email, we now have a field for that. Okay, so it'll be input emails value. Yep, give me one more second here. I'll finish this. Okay, password, same deal. It should be, click on that, should be input passwords value. All right, whatever they typed in is going to be set to the email. Whatever they typed in is going to be set to the password. Okay, if you switch those up, you switch them up. That's not good, right? Like you have the ability to make first name the last name. And you'll do that. You'll make that mistake at some point when you're designing stuff in here. You'll accidentally map things the wrong way and you'll be like, what is going on? And you just have to kind of troubleshoot it. Okay, I'm gonna go start back.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on here. You click the button, this to create new user, and click the start edit workflow. Okay, yeah, just make a new button, scroll up to the top and click on button. And then drag that onto the page and do start edit workflow.
So you're on the workflow.
Yep.
How,
Email.
where it says first name equals, how did you get that? I'm just looking if I can figure it out.
Okay, first name, I just did change another field. Okay, and I'm actually going to do it one more for something new now. We forgot to put in the employee. Right, we need to say yes or no for an employee. So remember, when they click the button, when they click that thing, they're saying to you that they're an employee. So what we're saying is we need that value. Let's see what it shows up as. The checkbox employee. So employee, checkbox employee. We're saying when it is checked, okay, that it should be yes. So the way we write that is checkbox employee is checked. So this is going to evaluate to yes or no. This is a nice helpful thing when you hover your mouse over this. It shows you what's going to happen when it finishes. So it's saying when a person checks the box, okay, it's going to evaluate to either a yes or no. So obviously when they check it, we're saying in agreement, yes. So it's going to set employee to yes. a lot of stuff going on there. Soon when you're doing this, you're going to feel like you're playing the most advanced game of chess or whatever that you've ever played in your life, because you'll be like walking through the logic of it and 10 steps deep and wondering like, what the hell is this going to do? And sometimes it's pays just to just test it, you know, just keep testing different versions of it. Okay, but this one evaluate to yes if it's checked, so it's going to set employee to yes. Great, that means when someone checked it, that it's going to come into the database as yes. And you now have all the information set. Okay, so we can do it. Okay, you can actually go to preview. Yeah.
When I go to do my,
Yeah.
last name pop up.
This, you can't get this set just like this.
What's the last name? I think it's first name on the page.
Okay, let me come take a look at your screen with you. Did all of you get to this? Feeling okay? I can come take a look at the
Yeah,
screen.
so mine
I'll come
wasn't-
troubleshoot.
Mine wasn't doing that yet. What I was thinking is because there's a user that's already given, and when you go back to data for data types,
Mhm.
there's a user that's already visible that you can't delete. And see, I added one and I put the
Really?
name, no.
Oh.
Go back to data
Yep.
types. See, I had added another data type that was user, so it shows it was 2 users on my screen.
Oh yeah, you don't want that. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's, I think that's what people are having a problem with, because the one that you can't delete is where it's automatically linking. it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you, that's for vehicle that has a user. Yeah, you don't want the user to have user. Yeah, so the user should not have user as a row in here. You only want that for vehicle. Yeah. Let me come troubleshoot the screen with you, but let's go to the preview option now for those that are at this stage. So you on the top right, you'll go to preview. So you're on the create new user page, you click preview. Okay, and this will feel like really cool. If you've done this right, this will feel like, holy crap. Like, this is neat. Okay, this is the first time you've been like experiencing the software. You go like, wow, that's neat how that works. Okay, so type something in, like type in your name. Yeah.
Just add status.
Did we forget to add status?
Yeah.
Let's forget and do it anyways. Okay, let's just see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna type in my name. By the way, you know, you could do whatever you want here. Password, you could do password, right? It doesn't matter. I'm gonna say I'm an employee. And to your point, we didn't hook up the status field yet. So let's see what's gonna happen. So I have the option to select it, right? This is where things, and you start working in Bubble, like you realize you made mistakes. Because when you're testing the software, like you'll test everything that could happen. So I'll click driver. Well, what's gonna happen is nothing, right? The field for our status, nothing's gonna happen to that row because we didn't tell it where to go. So this is not good for the user, right? The user clicks that, thinks like everything's good, but the database didn't update. So let's click create a new user. Did you like my alert there? Says JDo's already in use. Did I do anything to make that happen? No. Bubble just takes care of that. I love that, right? Awesome. So I can't use JDo. This is why they force you to do that create new user thing that I showed you before. You can't do create a new data thing because they do all of that in the background. Okay, this is really cool. I'm glad that, okay, I'm gonna do the stage here. So I click create a new user. Okay, notice what didn't happen. Okay, tell me what didn't happen next.
It didn't take you to the next page.
Didn't take me to the next page, great. Okay, anything else?
Didn't like clear it all out.
No confirmation?
Didn't clear
It
all
didn't
out.
clear any of the information out. All of these things happen when you experience an app that you take for granted. You have to tell Bubble to do all of that, right? Like us users take that stuff for granted. Like, of course it's gonna take us to the next page, but we didn't tell it to take you anywhere, right? We just said create a new user. That's exactly what it did. Right? You're gonna fight with computers this semester, right? Because you're gonna think like, oh, well, the computer should just know that the next thing to do is, nope. It doesn't know that until you tell it to do it. Okay, so like, let's go back to the database. So click on your app, click on data, and go look at the app data section now, and you should see the new user. Okay, it might need to refresh, so you might need to click app data and then click vehicles and users, and you can see it kind of refresh. But you should see, if you did it correctly, a new user who's created here, and notice the status field is empty. Right? we selected driver, but nothing showed up in the status field. Well, we have an error, right? We have a bug in our app. We should have fixed that. So let's go back to the workflow and the sign user up one. And let's add a new field called status. Notice how it's giving you a different kind of option here. You can't do equals. And you can't do equals because it's not going to just set to one value. It could be multiple values. So what they want to do is just add. What we're going to add is the current user. Okay, I'm sorry. Their status, right? The inputs, whatever's in the input. So we need to delete that. I got mixed up there. Whatever's in the input for status. The drop down, sorry, not input, drop down. Okay, so the status should be whatever the drop down status value is. Okay, so whatever the user selected from the drop down becomes the status. Okay, if you got through this step, you're on your way to like doing cool stuff in Bubble. Okay, this feels cool. I remember the first time like I made it through this first step, I was like, wow, that's neat. Like you just did a lot of steps to make one row in Excel, right? But it's more powerful than Excel because of all the validation that happens. And secondly, you didn't send someone a spreadsheet to add their name to a row, right? Yeah, right now there's no delete at all, right? You've given the user no way to delete their information or modify it, right? So,
illegal, isn't it?
What's that?
That's illegal, isn't it?
Maybe. So let's go back to design. Okay, let's complete the loop here. Let's go down to visual elements. I'm sorry, containers. Let's go down to containers and choose repeating group. But you know, go ahead and do that. Like stay on this page. I'm going to show you something while you do that. So you clicked on repeating group. Okay. Let me just show you something else that didn't happen. Like notice how the screen over here is still, you know, white. Normally we'd send the person to their account page, right? Or you send them to like the first, you know, welcome page. What we're going to do next is just prove that we create a user and it gets added to the database. So the simplest way to prove it is to just show the database off to the right. Right? We're just going to show when someone clicks this, we want it to just show up here to the right that a new user has been added. So let's do that now. Let's just demonstrate that it's working. Okay, so let's click on create repeating group and drag a box over here to the right. Okay, what type of content do we want to show? We want to show users. Okay. And let's have our data source be all users. You know, maybe you don't want to show everyone all the users, but for right now, let's just do a search for all users. Okay, I'll do that again. Okay, so you have user as a type of content. We want it to go search the user table for all users. So we're just going to do data source is do a search for the type user and we're good. Okay, so our type of content should be go look for the user table and do a search for all the things, just basically everything, right? With no restrictions, just show me everything in that table. Okay. Let me prove something to the error way first again. Okay, so we did it, right? Like it's pulling the information, but here's the problem, okay? If you click preview again, you're gonna notice that it's empty, right? So the repeating group is there. It's pulling the information. It actually is pulling the information. The only problem is it doesn't know what to show you. So it's pulling all the user information. We just haven't told it what pieces of information to actually show. Okay, so let's go back to the designer, the editor, and click on text. Now you have to be real careful here. And the top repeating group, again, this top section up here, You want to make sure you do it right inside that rectangle. You click and drag a text element. Okay. And instead of it being static text, like this is static text right here, let's make it dynamic text, which you have to click on this insert dynamic text option or insert dynamic data. Okay. We want the current cells users. Let's do first name. Okay, so all that's going to happen here is that when we create a new user, it's just going to show the first name of all of our users. Okay, that's what we just did.
That's a text box.
Yep, so I made a text box. I made sure it's in the top one. And I did insert dynamic, current cells, users, first name, or now I could do last name too, whatever. I'll delete that. So it's just going to show the first name. Okay. The status we also just fixed, so that should be good too. But let's go back to preview. Okay, yours probably shows the one user you created over here to the right. Maybe you had multiple users in there that would show both. But let's create a new user. So just type in a new person's name. I'll type in one of my friends' names. Say he's an employee and he's a writer, and I'll click create new user. So what's going to happen when I click create a new user? His name's going to pop up on the right, right? Because it's just going to show all the people in the database that are users. So this is just kind of a way to prove that like what you're doing is working. Sometimes app developers, they make this stuff over here to the right, and then they delete it. Right, so they created all this little thing over here just to show that like things are working as expected, and then they go and delete the thing on the right. Okay, but it's a nice kind of a hack, a nice way to just test your work, right? Is just to put it to the test and see like, should this information show up as it went into the database? Otherwise, you're forced to go back to the database to actually go see if it's worked. Right, the only other way to know like, did that actually work is to go back here to the database and click on data, go search for whatever you thought was supposed to happen, and go see. I'm going to click on this and refresh it. The only reason it didn't show up is because it's stuck, right? I need to click it to refresh it. And it has my new user, and the status now works accordingly. Yeah.
So in my repeating group on the preview page, it only shows one name now, not all
Yeah, same.
users.
Okay,
I'm not sure why.
so let's click on the repeating group. And then I'm going to come around. I'm going to set you all for a challenge, and then go look at some computers and troubleshoot. But let's click on that. You have the type of content as user.
Yeah.
Okay. And the data source. Let me erase this and start over. So I clicked here on data source. You did do a search for.
Yes, search for users.
Okay. So probably what's happened is it's only showing one, and you just have to scroll down to see the others.
No, yeah, it's only.
Does it look blue when you finish?
Looks like we're doing the same thing. So,
Okay. Let me take a look and see what the error is. I can't problem solve.
yeah, I did exactly. Search for users. Go to your phone shows one, which I have another one already.
Try making just a third one. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Different network, like try to get components. Yeah, you probably have one. You might want to, are you on the Instagram network? Click on your network. Yeah. I would follow the steps to join on that one. You can use that anywhere on campus. It's gonna give you a lot faster. speed. That might be one that just gets hung up all the time.
But then it should look like that.
Yeah, if you have that repeating group, so right.
Yeah, I got that sheet. Yeah, like when I go to 3D.
Go back to your, I think I'm gonna, go back to your database real fast. You go to your database and there might be a privacy rule set up.
Yeah, it says privacy rules apply.
Okay, so that's the reason why, and that's what I mentioned before about not seeing someone else's salary. We have a privacy rule set up accidentally where we're restricting the view to show a user because maybe we have a reason for that, right? We don't want to show other users, but here in this example, I was just showing you this one example. We just wanted to show all users to everyone. So we don't want any privacy rules set. So we'd go into privacy and you probably have under user a rule, like you probably your screen looks different than mine and you want to delete that rule.
Oh, okay.
And that will make everything show up to everyone. Okay. We'll work with privacy rules a little bit later on when we actually want to use them. But let me give everyone kind of a next challenge, and then I'll come around and look at the rest of the computer so you can keep moving forward. Great. Okay. Okay, I want you to, in the design, so go back to, for those that are all with me, I'll come around and troubleshoot, but I want you to create the same thing, okay, but for a vehicle. Okay, so right now, you just made a user, and this time you're gonna use the one I tried to show you before, the workflow I tried to show you. You're going to create a new, instead of new user, you're going to create a new vehicle. So create vehicle. This time you're actually going to use the data option. Okay, so if you're following me, you've done those steps. This time you're going to use data and you're going to create a new thing. Okay, so instead of creating a new user, this time you're creating a new vehicle. You'll use the data options here and create a new thing, and the type will be a vehicle. Okay, and then you'll go and set all the hooks like we did before, like a new input for the make, for the model, one for the year, and is that it? You can do it on the same one. So I'll just close this out. If the page isn't large enough, you can just click the background and then drag this down. Okay. So I want you to add the inputs to create a new vehicle. I think we just did make, model, user, and year. Okay. You don't need the user option, right? This is like me saying I shouldn't have to say what happened to the punt. Did I make it or miss it? We know it's you because you're logged in, right? When you're using the app and you're making your vehicle, I already know it's you. You're logged into the app, so I don't need to make a drop down and say like which user is this. Okay. Let me come around now and troubleshoot what the screens were at before, but try and make one for the vehicle. You can make
We've got things.
Okay, let's go.
all these are just gonna come from creating those. Mostly that shit. So he wants us to do that part. Okay, I thought he wanted us to.
It's the reason why I say correctly made, but they're going to be in trouble. They want to do the basic.
So.
The only difference is the steps that you're gonna do for this. You're gonna treat user one like it's a share. So in other words, you're not gonna go to. Your steps are gonna be a little bit different. So when you create your workflow, you're gonna go down to this one instead of the account one that I showed before, because you're treating that new user category that you set up like a vehicle. But if you wanted to do it like so that's structural level, you have to go back and set up all those things. On this. You don't have to worry about saying you need a year, the make model, year. You need a bunch of core and then you use your workflow for that lunch. Those are go back to when you put on this is your button, that's the program. And that's where you can do all of that. So we need to make this into a field instead of text. Right now it's things that with that one and then that is what makes it worse because the person has to input type it.
Pretty good.
Then you'll go back to the buttons workflow, and now it will be last name. And do the same for email messages. They're going to post it like this. And then you do on that. And you do then you will have the option to use. If you just make you can say email and password. And then you can do also. You guys all got over here?
Pass them around.
We'll work on one just like this, like we're setting everything up just like this, but for a recipes. Yeah, that's what we'll do as a class. We'll do the recipe one as a class, and then the option exists for anyone to make it. So there's several students that are working on their own, in addition to the recipe. The extra one or extra credit points. Anything. Yeah. I want to make sure that when we're doing the recipe app together, you all learn all of this stuff as a group. We face the same challenges together. But whatever you're doing on your own, keep going with it. I'll certainly help in the issues you run into, but each lesson that we go through will make doing your own thing easier. Let me, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so that's okay. It'll put a comma that just represented a number, but that's okay. Yeah. That just gives us the reassurance that it is something you can do a calculation. Like you get some tracking from it, but the user only sees what you want them to see. So like that would be yeah. Oh, it's there are so many little things in Bubble, like little tricks and tips to move to keep moving on. Let's go for about 15 more minutes or so. 10 more minutes, yeah.
So I have the make model here.
Okay.
What should I do for the user part of the vehicle?
Okay, so that's what we'll do now. Let me bring in my inputs just so you should also have done this step already. So I'll put my inputs, make, and I'm just going to copy and paste this, and then I'll change it to model. Just be careful when you copy and paste. You know, you want things to make sure that they still behave appropriately, but make model, and we did year too, right? So year we'd want to set to number. We want that to be a data validation, right? We don't want someone to type in letters when you only want them to have numbers. So we do the content format to integer. Okay, so if they typed in something other than an integer, then we'd have a problem with that, right? Okay, now if they typed in 1988 and that wasn't even the year of that car, we got another problem to deal with, right? So what I found in doing research and building apps is people will do really dumb things. Okay. Like if you give them an option, if there's a way for them to do it to make an error, they make the error, like no doubt about it. So you want to try and restrict as much as you can. There's one last thing I don't know, I think I'll have the time to show you today, but we can also, like I showed you before, restrict special characters and spaces, right? There's a special part of data validation where we make it so they can't type in something that has a special character, okay? Because someone will put in the model and they'll put an exclamation point after it. The most common error, what people will do is they'll type a word in and then they'll hit the space key and there'll be a space after the word, right? So like it'll be Chevy space and that's what they entered. It's like, yeah, anything that can happen happens, okay? And then you get in trouble. Okay, so create a new vehicle. Yeah, we're gonna leave off the user here, okay? And we'll go to set the workflow. And we want to make a change to things, to data. We want to create a new thing. The type that we're creating is a vehicle this time. Okay, not a user, but a vehicle. And we have to hook up all the fields. So we have to say that the make is whatever the input for make was. So input makes value. For model is input model's value. The year is input the year's value, and we're all good there. Okay, now we have one more to add, which is not something that they control. But again, this is like the automatic stuff you want to build into your app for user experience. We want to add the user, right? We want to say that who owns this vehicle? Well, the person creating the vehicle is probably, not all the time, it depends on how you set up your app, but the person creating the vehicle, we're going to just assume for the purposes of this exercise, is the person that is tied to that vehicle. So the user that gets added to the vehicle should be whoever's typing it in. Well, the way we get to that is to say the current user. Okay, so we say the user, what we're going to do to the user column right here is to add a new person, and who that is the current user. Okay. So again, this is like when I was saying when I'm using that app and I'm putting and it says, did you make or miss the putt? And I had to say yes or no. Well, should I have to say that? No, right? It should just, if I miss the putt, it should say no, like it should put no in the field. But just like saying when you add a user, you shouldn't have to ask the user, who are you? Right? You already know who they are. They're the current user. They're already logged in. So we can just add them as the user. So we're good there. And we'll go back to the preview. You can do up here or go to design, then go to preview, doesn't matter.
What time is that? For database or is it adding?
Let's see what happens. So let's do Chevy Silverado 2021. We're gonna create that new thing, right? We're creating a new row in the vehicles table. We're creating a new row. We're gonna create that vehicle. Notice that we didn't reset inputs. Again, like it just sticks there. So it's hard to tell if anything actually happened, right? So there's nothing to show us a visual cue. We have no clue. We just have to go back to the database and go to vehicles in the app data section. Okay, and see that the database has actually been reflected to add that we had that vehicle, Chevy Silverado, and look at the user here. Okay, it went ahead and put in forum. Because I was, great question. When I did preview, it just went with the last user I'd created to preview the app. I can click run as, okay, to change the user. Okay, so let me go now to John Doe. I'll go to the create user page as John Doe. Okay, so I'm going to enter into the app as if I'm John Doe. Okay, and I'm going to add a, what do we want?
Lambo.
Okay, so I'm John Doe. And I click create new vehicle. Nothing happened because we didn't tell it to do anything special here, but we know that if we go back to the database and click on app data and vehicles, that Chevy Camaro will be tied to John Doe. Okay. That is what that's the, when you're scrolling on Instagram, like that's the only way it knows, right? It knows it's you. So it's only going to show you your Chevy Camaro because that's tied to you and not pictures of other people's random feed or car or whatever, right? Because you've tied it up in the database the right way, right? That's how it works. That's what makes an app an app. Okay. So when I go to show the data, I'll say, well, you know what? Only show me the people, or only show me the Camaros, or only show me whatever I want to see, right? And it just depends on whatever the user, whatever you want the user to experience. Did I see a hand up? Or, yeah.
When you're done, if you go back to the step one and go for it.
Sure. Do it again. Yeah, no problem. There was one last step I wanted to show you. We'll do the data validation piece. Okay, I think I did do all the stuff I want to show you, but you know, basically just one more time with the vehicles. This would be different this time, right? A repeating group, where this time the content would be a vehicle. We do a search for all vehicles. Okay, and we'd add in the text into here, let's just say the current state of the vehicle, the make. Okay, so just show all the cars, all the makes of all the cars that are in the database. Again, as long as we don't have any privacy rules, set, it's just showing Chevy, right, the 2 makes. Again, I don't just, it doesn't just have to be one, right? Like we could go back to the user. In fact, this is normally how it's done. You know, we have the user's, I think, first name here. Well, of course, I would also probably show their last name, right? And in addition to last name, I'd probably also do, you know, their, let's see, status. Yeah. So preview. So that way I get a little more information about who they are, you know. It's my form, he's a writer. See more information in the repeating group. Okay. So you can put whatever you want back in this repeating group. I just only showed the first name before. Okay, I said at the beginning of the class, all applications have 4 basic steps. You just did the first one. Thank you. Right, what do these letters stand for?
Create.
Actually, you did the first 2 steps. So congratulations. Good. Create. You did that today, right?
Yeah.
Create a new record. R stands for read, or also view. That is the repeating group, right? You can view it. You can see what you created in the database. U is update. Do you have that functionality for the user right now? Can the user update their record? They can't change their name, right? You want them to be able to change their name. You can't do that yet. That's the U. And D. Okay, obviously the delete is the easy one. Okay. All we need is a button. I'll stop here for today. Let me just add in this to show you. You would need a button right here. Okay. Oh, not a button, an icon. That's a trash can. Right? That trash can has a workflow. And what we want to do is delete a thing, right? And the thing that we want to delete is the current cell's user. Got it? So if I want to get rid of John Doe, bye-bye. Gone. Out of database. Do you think there should be are you sure you want to do this step? That's user experience, right? Are you sure you want to delete?
Nah, just delete.
Oh, gone. Sorry. Some apps do that and you go, whoa, I didn't mean to do that.
That sucks.
Yeah. All right, see you next class. Keep working on this. Work on this particular page. Make sure you can do all these steps and feel comfortable with it. Try and get to do the update. Challenge yourself. See if you can figure out how to do the update. You did all the 3 other steps. See if you can get the last one.
So when it's just user add current users.
Yep, and you don't have to add anything else. Okay. Delete, I click on Max with the backspace, keep it set, and then try to bring now click off of it.
Oh, so design. When you input it, like it actually creates new people.
Just how you guys do it.
It's because of how you set up the work.
I'm just gonna change that.
Okay, yep, so change that, and you're gonna get, everything's gonna be fine. Go do user one. And I'm gonna show you how to use it. So instead of, yeah, click on set new, yep, and do user one.
So now click this on there.
It's pulling from start workbook.
Data, things, create a new thing.
Go to your data.
So now you're doing the vehicle. So, well, you should have a vehicle there. So that means you did something wrong.
Okay,
in your data.
what you would do,
Should this not be existing?
There should be a.
well, if you had it all, it's
You should have
user, you'd be
a
fine.
separate type there.
If everything in user one was where it should be in user, you'd be
So
fine.
maybe you-
What you would do instead of this was try to build.
Okay,
if
yeah,
you were
so
trying to
you need to
do
make,
workaround,
because that's a
go back to
separate
workflow,
Excel table for the vehicle.
And you'd add another
So you
step.
actually have that, and then you can.
where you change a different thing, you change user one. So instead of changing the view, I want to make sure that you change the user one, you'd be able to do what you're trying to do.
When I make the app, why do I bring for proof pictures of the codes?
The link, actually, if you send me yep. And, give me 1 second here to stop the.
Do I email it?